bring this thing to the world is an incredible thing, and I know the fans around the world appreciate it.
Absolutely, Dan. Supply and demand. This is happening in every little nook and corner of the world. I had the chance to go to China this past February, and it was amazing, the reception for the knowledge, just for the education. They are tuned in. They're all paying attention to their health. They're paying attention to supplements as well as competition. So the world is a fit place, and Joe Weider predicted that back when he started this thing on this global expansion with his brother Ben. And Amazon.com is definitely paying it forward by sharing this with the rest of the world.
All right, folks, moving into our comparisons, we're going to have all 18 Olympians on stage.
This is where the rubber hits the road, Dan. The first, all-important first call-out. It usually sets the tone for who's who and what's what in terms of final placements. Everybody on that stage wants to be in that very first call-out. Naturally, if Phil Heath's name is called out, you want to be standing next to Phil Heath.
I interviewed Steve Weinberger a short while ago over at digitalmuscle.com, and when I did that, I asked him about that responsibility, that pressure of being the voice that gives the most coveted call-out of the year, that coveted Olympia first call-out. The bodybuilders train all year trying to be in that first group. Right now, Steve Weinberger is gathering the opinions of his panel, but it's his voice that's going to tell these gentlemen who that first group he wants to look at, and you're going to hear it right now.
Dexter and Phil.
It's a lot of guys to be calling out in the first call-out. I remember, Dan, when they called out 3 guys.
Well, you're not looking at any surprises here. I think this is kind of the group that we were looking for. Brandon Curry did make his way into this first call-out, and I know that's something that he obviously wanted to achieve. But with Sean Roden and last year's top 5 finisher, William Bonac, and of course Phil, this is, and Big Ramy, this is a group that we sort of anticipated seeing. And Dexter Jackson, once again, assumes his spot and an Olympia first call-out.
And right away, they're moving Big Ramy in close next to Phil Heath, and Phil's like, bring it on. Phil's not shy with 6 Olympia titles at home on his mantle. And of course, these guys are all nipping at his heels. But Big Ramy is serving notice with the shoulders and the thighs.
All right, so I'm going to ask you to compare Phil Heath to Mamdouh Alasbaye Big Ramy right now, because this is a key comparison.
That's a very close comparison. Apples and oranges still, because Phil's a little bit more genetically advantaged there. He's put together a little bit more pleasing, but you can't ignore those arms on Big Ramy, or those thighs.
A little more dimension and depth to the upper half of Phil Heath's physique. Obviously, Ramy has the overpowering thighs. Of course, Phil Heath's thighs aren't too shabby either. So you're talking about 2 of the very best in the planet. It's going to be interesting to see how this thing plays out as we move forward, and not to be forgotten, all of this, you know, Dexter Jackson and Sean Roden and William Bonac, and now, of course, Brandon Curry arrives in this group.
They'll be moved around and shuffled quite a bit, but right now, Dan, I'm going with Big Ramy and Phil Heath as the leaders of this lineup. Big Ramy's too big to ignore, and Phil is the reigning and defending champion. I think Phil is appearing a little bit bloated, and that's going to work against him if he doesn't dry that up by tomorrow. But that's the thing, Dan. They will have time to improve on what we see as shortcomings here tonight.
And Phil has a history of making key adjustments in those 24 hours.
Makes the difference in winning and losing. I saw him losing and yet win because he made such a transformation in 24 hours.
Well, I think so far what we know is Big Ramy is climbing the ladder. He's moving up.
He's serving notice, but I got to tell you, I think Phil is still holding steadfast on that #1 placement. I'm going to be curious to see what's going to happen after Phil and Ramy, because right now I got Phil and Ramy. So if that's my 1 and 2, I got to look at 3 and 4.
And let's look at Ramy and Dexter, because Dexter out-conditions Big Ramy all day.
He does.
And, you know, so it's funny because we're always, you know, we're quick right now. We're jumping right on the Ramy train. But right next to Big Ramy, to his left, is Dexter Jackson, which brings a completely different look. So I think we owe it to the process to compare these guys appropriately.
Absolutely. And when they start to change them around, we'll start changing our appearances accordingly, because that's what the call-out's for. So now William Bonac is going to get the opportunity to stand to the left of the champion. I don't know that William Bonac has the size just yet to stand next to Phil or Big Ramy. But Ramy does look a little bit flat. He could have a little bit more oil on his body to shine just a little bit more. All these guys are going to look considerably better by tomorrow after they get done posing. But Phil, you see the water coming out on Phil's chest As he starts to shine, we're seeing the sweat come out. That's the water that you hold subcutaneously under your skin. Brandon is not sweating. Big Ramy is not sweating. That's because they've dried out as much as they can. Phil looks like a little bit rotary to him, especially in the midsection. It's coming out on the chest, shoulders, and arms.
Phil and Ramy back in line, please. Rolly, Nathan, Josh, and Cedric, come join us.
Dexter, William Bonac, Phil Heath, and Big Ramy were sent back in line, which gives us our first sort of tip of the hand as to what head judge Steve Weinberger is thinking.
It's not just him, it's the collectively, and
Sure.
I think that's appropriate. I was looking at the exact same thing. I mean, William Bonac moved up as far as I'm concerned. He was fifth a year ago. They took the top four and set them aside. Now, this is where the contest is, because I think that top four actually set themselves apart, and Sean Roden is not a happy camper right here, but it's a warranted situation. Sean didn't have what he had a year ago. Last year's first runner-up, you can still see he relaxes and the stomach is still, there's a little bit of distension there. And the detail in the quads, he looks to be a heavier bodybuilder than last year, and that doesn't work with a physique like Roden. And when you see the double bicep, it's just not, something's off in that. A year ago, he was on, it's not there. And of course, Brandon Curry has got to be one of the happier bodybuilders, even though he's in call-out number 2. This is a guy, this is his third contest this year. So if anybody's happy up there right now, it's Brandon Curry. If anybody's pissed off, it'd be Sean Roden. I know Nathan Diash is happy. And Cedric McMillan, I've never seen him not be a happy bodybuilder, regardless of the placement.
He's always happy no matter what he's doing, but unfortunately, he is not going to do what we've been waiting for him to do on an Olympia stage. It doesn't look like it's going to happen tonight.
And you can see that in the face. I saw it yesterday. The face just didn't look like he suffered, like, you know. And some bodybuilders aren't willing to suffer because they're not going to, you know, give everything they have to this sport. They're going to do the best with what they have. Cedric's probably been very busy after winning the Arnold Classic. I got to tell you, Dan, 91, I won the Arnold Classic, and I went on tour. By the time I got to the Mr. Olympia, I went through the motions. There's a lot that goes with winning that Arnold Classic in March that you kind of run out of gas by September. The other bodybuilders didn't have that same disposition, especially Phil. He was well rested. Cedric McMillan right now, his shape is keeping him in this game.
And of course, the new trend with technology is these guys will watch themselves on the big monitor as they're hitting these shots. So they are watching this event right along with the rest of you guys here on the big screens here at the Orleans Arena. But I got to tell you, this is where it gets, like you mentioned, Sean Ray, this gets really difficult right now for the judging panel because there's not a lot separating these guys, and it's all about getting into that top 6. That's that elite fraternity over the course of years, that top 6 at the Olympia.
Yes.
And right now, it's very much up for grabs.
And there's 2 guys from this call-out that are going to try to move into that top 6. Roy Winkler looks like he's holding his own, but again, he gets better as he poses. That water's coming out, he gets better. Sometimes he forgets the stomach. Brandon Curry's a guy that can wind up cracking that top 6. And Sean, right now, I just don't see him coming up.
Well, it looks like they're going to move Sean into... they're going to swap Nathan and Sean Roden. And Sean Roden's just trying to fight his way back.
Yes.
And I would say don't give up on Sean Roden yet because he can fight his way into this top group. He is a notorious top 5 finisher here at the Olympia for the last several years. So
that Nathan Diash got called up into the center. He's a good little bodybuilder from the UK. Again, the lower back needs some work on it, but he's a very complete little bodybuilder.
And he is, Steve is putting them to work. He's kind of creating every type of comparison. I know these guys, when it's all said and done, the only complaint we hear is they always say, why didn't you let me stand next to that guy? And I know Steve's doing everything he can right now to make sure that nobody asks that question. And right now these guys are going to hit him most muscular, and we're going to see if we can find some point of difference to separate these guys.
Well, it's a pretty big deal when you were second in the world a year ago and you're battling to stay in the top 6, Dan. That's a strong reality for Sean Roden. He's wrestling with that mentally right now because he has no idea what the judges are going to do with him as he's being moved around in this lineup.
So every year we look at an Olympia lineup and we'll say, who nailed it? And based on what we're seeing so far, if anybody were to ask me who nailed it, I don't know if I have an answer for him.
I don't either. I mean, there's a little bit of criticism for all the guys. Again, Phil looked a little bit bloated in the stomach, and he didn't hold it in the transitions. Big Ramy looked a little bit flat, could have had a little bit darker color, could have had a little more shine on his physique. William Bonek looked a little bit tighter than he did last year in certain poses, but not a lot of improvement. I know he's 5 pounds heavier, but not a lot of improvement on William Bonek. I think by default, he's moving up, and Roden is the one that's paying the price.
And if you're just joining us here at the Orleans Arena for our coverage of Olympia weekend, that all-important first call-out, the way it played out is Phil Heath, Big Ramy, William Bonek, and Dexter Jackson were set
Thank you, gentlemen.
back in line, which kind of gave us a sense that they are being looked at as the top 4, at least early on in the competition. So if you were kind of waiting to see how this might play out, Phil Heath, Big Ramy, William Bonek, Dexter Jackson seem to have the early look for those top 4. But my guess is Steve is going to continue to make these guys work as he goes a little bit further down the lineup into some of the lower call-outs.
And again, Dan, I mean, these guys all won a pro event to be here, with the exception, I believe, on points, Max Charles. And of course, some of these athletes might have wanted not to come into this contest. We know mentally Josh Narkowitz is probably burnt. On one occasion, he qualifies by winning the Tampa Pro, and he's excited about doing Olympia. The next thing you know, he's at a funeral. Max Charles traveled the globe in order to gather up enough points to be here, along with Jeff Beckham. And of course, Johnny Jackson comes basically out of retirement to qualify for this contest. He's in the last call-out, but this is a veteran. He's been here 13 years. Where else does he want to be?
You know, this might be one of the more impressive last call-outs. We'll see. I mean, there's some really good bodybuilders in this group. So it's great to see just the quality in this Olympia lineup, because when these guys were out there by themselves, these guys look pretty good.
Yes, they did.
And here we are looking at them in what appears to be a last call-out situation. But you just can't say enough as we sort of process what's played out so far, that Dexter Jackson, at almost 48 years old, is back in what appears to be the Olympia top 4 again.
Right, and a couple of his colleagues. You got Victor Martinez. We may be seeing the last of Victor Martinez here at the Olympia, along with Johnny Jackson, both 40-plus-year-old bodybuilders who I don't know how much gas in the tank they have, because they're usually typically up there in the top. I mean, Victor's used to being up in the top, and this is not something that's a pleasant experience for Victor Martinez. Even though he's on that Olympia stage, it's not where he's customarily used to being.
Front lat spread.
And as a programming note, when this portion of the judging completes, we will move in to the under 212-pound division, where the now legendary James Flex Lewis will take a shot at another title in that division, a division he has dominated for several years. And we'll get to that in just a moment. So we still have a lot of ground to cover as our coverage here on Amazon.com continues. And these Olympia weekends, Sean, they are just endless storylines.
Absolutely. I saw 1983 Mr. Olympia, the Lion of Lebanon, in the house. Of course, 6-time Mr. Olympia Dorian Yates is bebopping around out there. You never know who you're going to walk into at these Mr. Olympia expos, and then you wind up here at the event. I heard that The Rock is going to be somewhere around, and Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, these are what gets people in the gym and come to Las Vegas to see these types of athletes. Very decorated, very accomplished, game changers, I'd call them, that paved the way for the guys that we're looking at tonight.
And you did mention Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's name. He will be in attendance for tomorrow night's event, so we're excited to welcome Dwayne back to Olympia weekend, where he has suddenly become a big part of the Olympia family, and we're very excited to welcome he and folks at $7 Productions to Las Vegas to be a big centerpiece here and be a part of the crowning of a new champion. So this sport has become all about the stars. Arnold, I'm told, will be there, as you mentioned. Betty Wheeler, I'm told, will be in town tomorrow as well.
And so now we come back, Dan, where the judges take another final look. And this is one of those things where it can really throw a monkey wrench in what we were thinking about. Because now you got Dexter in the same call-out as Sean Roden. And of course, we talked about how improved Nathan Diashin was, and I mentioned how Roland Winkler gets better as he poses, but Brandon Curry, he's right there. This is something that he dreamed of. Brandon Curry standing next to Dexter Jackson on the Mr. Olympia stage. I mean, these are two Arnold Classic decorated winners from yesterday's past.
The two storylines in this call-out is they're going to make Dexter Jackson fight a little bit more for that spot, and they're also going to give Sean Roden an opportunity to take that spot from the blade.
That's what you got to love about the IFBB and Steve Weinberger, making sure everyone's getting that look, getting that comparison. 1 minute Sean Roden's dejected and Dexter Jackson is elated, and now they're standing in the same comparison going, what the hell's going on here?
And they had to do this. They couldn't let this thing play out without Sean and Dexter standing next to each other, because those guys have gone toe-to-toe now for a few years. A rivalry has played out with these two guys kind of going back and forth. And, of course, Sean Roden got the best of Dexter a year ago, and you can be sure that among Dexter's objectives is to settle that score this year with Sean Roden.
Absolutely. And, again, every bodybuilder that's here feels like they have an equal opportunity to win. Sean Roden was very vocal about coming here to take the title from Phil Heath, and Phil Heath very vocal about not letting anyone take the title. And of course, Dexter Jackson's got the 2008 Sandow Trophy comfortably home on his mantle and would like nothing more than to walk off with the 400,000 plus tomorrow night here at the 53rd Mr. Olympia Championships.
So the other takeaway now from this call out is that clearly Big Ramy is in the top 3, but even still, more than that, William Bonac appears to be in the top 3, which is a really big story.
Well, Neil Hill, his trainer, we talked yesterday, and he said, look, take it to the house. William's better than he was a year ago, and right now, it sounds like he may be serving notice. 5'6", 229 pounds from the Netherlands. William Bonac is legit. But this is an interesting comparison, Dan, because we could flip some coins here, and things can change on a dime with respect to the different types of physiques that we're looking at. We're looking at an off Sean Roden. We're looking at an older Dexter Jackson, a young, fresh up-and-comer in Nathan D'Asher, and of course Brandon Curry getting a second re-energized look by way of the Oxygen Gym and the Camel Crew. If those guys weren't there, Brandon Curry's not here.
You know, when you look at these guys, this particular call-up, it's really hard for a guy like Rolly Winkler to fit into this room. He becomes the odd man out in a lineup like this.
Yeah, because he's got so much muscle. He's kind of boxy. He's got the big arms. He doesn't have the pretty aesthetics. He's going to be standing between Dexter and Sean, two genetic freaks. In the relaxed pose, you're going to see as they start to open up, Rolly will start to lose ground between these two genetic freaks. But Sean Roden is just a little bit too comfortable in between rounds, relaxing his stomach. I'd like to see him keep that stomach tight like it is right now, but he has a tendency to take long, deep breaths, which tells me he's not in the kind of condition he's typically used to being in. That's Rolly's pose right there. I think it's very hard. Dexter Jackson can stand it up, but Rolly, after that, Rolly kind of starts to fade in comparison poses.
But that most muscular from Rolly Winkler is damn impressive.
It's world class.
Spread out, guys.
As if the
Everyone
stage
take a
isn't
step.
big enough, huh, Dan? Hitting elbows.
Take a step.
It's compared. There's a lot at stake. This has a tendency to set the tone for the kind of money these guys can make in terms of their guest appearances, in terms of their social media. I mean, first through 10th is very important to these bodybuilders. None of them want to lose, but it means something to place 7th, 6th, 5th place in the Mr. Olympia, especially when you're representing other countries.
Well, one of the reasons why that 5th place spot is such a coveted spot is because that means you don't have to compete all year. Top 5 at this event qualifies for next year. So they're going to bring out, as we mentioned earlier, Phil Heath, Mamadou Asbaye, Big Ramy, and William Bonac for a top 3 comparison. And it would be reasonable to guess this will probably be our final comparison of this round.
It will be, and I doubt that tomorrow anybody's going to make the necessary changes to change what we're looking at right now.
Well, what we're looking at is 2 bodybuilders who have moved up. William Bonac, Big Ramy, neither of them have ever tasted the top 3 in the world, and it looks like that's in the future for them in the next 24 hours. Phil Heath is trying to fend off both of them and retain the most coveted title in bodybuilding, and he's going to work for it. Because you can be sure that as Phil Heath directs traffic up there, you can be sure that Phil Heath's going to have to work for it. But really, as you look at these guys, it's hard to imagine, as great as Ramy is, as wide as he is, as thickly built as he is, with all that dense, grainy muscle and the clear improvements in the world-class conditioning that he has finally brought to the Olympia stage. People always used to say, if Ramy gets it together and comes in shape, is it going to be good enough to knock off Phil Heath? So I think that question, I'll pose it to you. Is it good enough to take out Phil?
I think it's damn close. I would not be surprised, Dan, if we don't see exactly what you're talking about. It's very possible. I'm not going to say probable, but it's very possible. Steve Weinberger is a very fair head judge, and I saw Ramy over in Kuwait, beat Dexter and Sean Roden.
And I'll tell you what, Phil Heath might be laughing right now. But Steve Weinberger just put the defending champion on the outside and moved Big Ramy into the center spot. You can read into that. We don't want to overstate it. But at the end of the day, right now, Big Ramy is getting his chance to stand in the center of what appears to be the final call-out of the day. At the very least, we have some intrigue.
Well, I'm not going to end it there. William Bonac might wind up in the middle, too, and give them all a fair shot. But Big Ramy, he's serving notice, man, and I'm not going to say that it's impossible. Phil's genetics are far more superior than Ramy's, but there's individual poses where Ramy is undeniably all up in his grill, and we cannot discount what little William Bonac is bringing, because William is as complete as they come. He's just smaller. I faced the same situation, Labrada, same situation, Muhammad McAway. Sometimes when you're small, you're the odd man out. And right now, these two big men in Phil Heath and Big Ramy, this is a contest that's up for grabs as of tonight.
And it's a bit of an apples and oranges situation, and we're kind of back to that. We kind of moved away from the apples and oranges debate when Ronnie's reign ended, when Jay's reign ended, but we're kind of back there now. Big Ramy's the big, thick, massive bodybuilder. And they're going to do exactly what you said. They're going to put William in the middle, which probably relieves Phil just a little bit right now.
Look at he's smiling. He's like, thank you.
Because the narrative has just shifted in that moment where now he's no longer concerned. But you know what? He should be concerned.
He should be concerned. Big Ramy's been coming for a long time. I got to imagine Jay Cutler, when he saw Phil Heath coming. I can imagine Ronnie Coleman when he saw Jay Cutler coming. Eventually, it happens and every dog has their day. But as I look at Phil Heath, as good as his physique is with those big overblown deltoids, his chest is a little bit diminished as a result of the shoulders. My eyes keep coming back to Ramy in terms of being the guy that's going to be able to stand with Phil and battle with Phil. And we're not even talking about Ramy's calves, because they're not even really a factor here. His size, his shoulder width, the girth, it's something that you can't ignore on those thigh sweeps.
Well, the other thing you can't ignore is the fact that here in 2017 at Olympia, we have ourselves a legitimate battle. We're not going to come away from this prejudging with a clear sense of who won the contest. Big Ramy has done the work. William Bonac is impressive. And Phil Heath is good, but he may have cracked open that door just enough to keep things interesting.
He left the door open. Tomorrow we're going to find out.